Well, hello and welcome to this episode of the Monday Minute. Hi, my name is Ken Freeman, and my question for you today is your board broken? I'm talking about the roles and responsibilities versus control. You see, my vision is to see well funded, well managed, and well led ministries that glorify God and have a great relationship with their donor investors. In other words, to see centers that are successfully managed. Unfortunately, as the story goes, board of directors sometimes keep this from happening. Let me share a true story from a friend of mine who is a professional financial management consultant without really identifying the real players. And I quote, "A ministry executive needed to terminate one of his key managers. There was no question that the manager put the ministry in a position that could severely hurt their credibility within their industry. The potential for public relations damage was beyond his ability to rehabilitate them." Some of us have had to deal with this type of an issue. This executive director agonized over making this decision, was weighed down by the options, and with the counsel of the ministry's attorney, finally concluded that the manager would have to be released. At the meeting, the manager admitted their error to the executive director and the head of human resources and fully understood the resign or be terminated position they had put themselves in. He received a phone call from a member of his board telling him to be in attendance at an executive committee meeting that evening. The board member went on to relay that he had met with the employee, who by now couldn't understand what they had done wrong. The board member managed to inject themselves squarely between the manager and the executive director, adding layers of liability to the board member's personal risk profile and undermining the authority of the executive director that the board had delegated to him. Now, for the scary part of the story, the board considers themselves to be a policy board. Well, what is a policy board? By definition, a policy board manages their one employee, the executive director, by means of written policies, periodic reviews, and a little else. So what went wrong in our example? Let's begin by looking at the difference between management boards from policy boards. What is a management board? A management board is one that is used when a staff isn't available to fill all the roles required for the ministry. These board members serve two purposes, that is, of governing and that of operating. As long as great communication and teamwork are present, this type of a board, a management board, works. But when the ministry begins adding layers of staff to assume more operational roles, the board's overlap must diminish in favor of the staff doing the work. At some point, the ministry has enough resources and staff to relieve the board of all the need to wear two hats, and thus the board has to remove itself from the operational role or the operational side of the ministry and redirect its efforts and focus on forming policy. What is a policy board? A policy board then writes broad policy and hires one employee, the executive director. The executive director is responsible to interpret the policies and to report on his or her progress toward meeting the ends. In other words, what is the ministry supposed to be doing? And if the executive director has properly interpreted the policies, all is well. If not, adjustments have to be made in either the policy or the executive director's interpretation. But in neither case does the board that once was a managing board, that is now a policy board, in neither case does that board return to micromanaging the ministry. This frees the board from other areas of focus, such as its own agenda, recruiting and training great leaders, and finding resources for the ministry to help the executive director they've hired to do his or her job better. Now, let's go back to our example problem. You see, some board members just don't want to let go of the reins of control. And this is the same way that some ministries take the term nonprofit too literally. Many boards feel that by protecting the ministry is their highest and best use of their time, circumventing the responsibilities they have delegated to the executive director. Add that to another component of board leadership, that of the board speaking as one, and I refer to this as board unity. This means that if the entire board has not said it, then the individual board member can't say it by himself or herself. No individual board member has the authority to direct actions of the executive director or his staff without written board minutes outlining those powers and stating under what circumstances they may be used. Now, if we looked at an example of a healthy policy board, this is where the board appoints one of its members to work directly with the new, say, chief financial officer to formulate a formal counting and reporting system for the ministry to use. And this appointment should state the circumstance of when it is to end. Upon board approval of the system, the appointment will end, and then it should be viewed as a temporary condition. Okay, but what about the problem that we are looking at for today's broadcast? What went wrong in this example of ours stems from a lack of trust. If the board really believed that its responsibility is to protect the ministry, it should put more effort into writing really great policies and working closely with the executive director to ensure the ends and the purposes are carried out through the ministry. If some members of the board take things into their own hands, there should be a board discipline policy related to members who act inappropriately, and collectively the board should confront the behavior of the one that is out of line. Keep in mind that we are not told in Scripture to be nice when being good is called for. Being good is not always popular, but it is the right thing to do. For the complete transcript of today's report, click to download it right now by going to monday-minute.com and click to get today's transcript. In the transcript report, I will give you the contact information for Dan Mirgon Associates, who provided today's topic. You may want to also, while visiting there, download two other great reports that we have for you, one called Advancing Your Board and one called Think Leadership. Well, thank you for listening to the Monday Minute. This is Ken saying, meet me again next Monday as we once again bring you the Monday Minute. Now, keep up the good work you're doing. The other side just can't stand it. Thanks for listening.